All right, we'll say good morning. Let us begin. A lot to do and not a lot of time. Baruch Hashem. So we'll say we're going to begin by thanking our sponsors, our TORAH sponsors for the month of Adar Aleph, Paul and Kathy Pollack, for dedicating all the Shimon Drushos this month in memory of Paul's grandparents, Zechariah and Dinah Bas Dov. Art and Sherry Miller for dedicating the Shurim and Drushos this month in loving memory of Art's brother, Reuven Ben Betzalel V'Rachel. Our Day of Learning sponsor, Eli and Joel Rashkovsky, in memory of Eli's grandfather, Nachum Gershon Ben Menachem Mendel. Our Daf Yomi sponsor, Alan Wiseman, creation of the Arzite of his father-in-law, Charles Newman Zechariah Ben Yisrael Tzvi. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah and the families a nechama. So with that, let us begin. A lot to do today. Today's daf is Chav Beis. We are picking up on the middle of Chav Aleph Amud Beis, and we left off literally in the middle of the page. Says the Gemara, Migimel va'ad Zayin. So it's right across from Tosos Mikan. Right across from Tosos Mikan. Migimel va'ad Zayin meishiv eino shoel. Mikan ve'elach sholem meishiv kidarko. So the Bryce is said in yesterday's daf that between days 3 and 7, Meishiv, if somebody greets you, this is 3 and 7 of Shiva. Between 3 and 7 of Shiva, you could respond to a greeting, ve'eno shol, but you cannot inquire about someone else's welfare. Mikan ve'elach shol meishiv kidarko. After Shiva, you could the Aval could ask, the Aval could respond without any qualifications. Is that true or minhu? If a person finds an Aval within Shloshim, medaber imo tanchumin, he could express words of consolation. But you should not inquire about the welfare. Shouldn't ask an Aval, how you doing, within 30 days, right? You shouldn't inquire about their welfare. Within 30 days. After 30 days, shal b'shlomo, you could ask an Avel how they're doing. Ve'eno medaber imo tanchumin, but you cannot give words of consolation to them after 30 days. Meise ishta, because we'll say the idea being, we'll see, once the Avelis is over, one should no longer offer any words of consolation. We'll discuss why that is. Meise ishta v'nase isha acheres, if a man loses his wife and he remarries, Eino Rasha Likanis Lebeso Ledaber Imo Tanchumin. So it's actually an interesting case. If a man loses his wife and he remarries, so halacha lamaisa, you should not go ahead and enter into his home and give him words of consolation for his first wife after he's married to his second wife. Now Rashi points out over here, we're talking about a case where a man remarried within Shloshim. Right, let's say his wife passed away, he remarried in Shloshim. I will say, now that may sound strange, but I will say, we're going to see, for example, that there are situations where Chazal strongly encourage that. For example, a woman passes away and she leaves behind young children. And so again, the husband, right, needs to provide a maternal figure for those children. Chazal encouraged the husband to be able to remarry as quickly as possible. So again, sounds strange to us, but Lamaisa, that's the case. So the wife passes away, husband remarries within Shloshim. So you should not go into the house and offer him words of consolation for his first wife once he's married to his second wife. Makes sense. Matzal b'shuk, if you find the guy in the marketplace, meaning outside of the house, not with his second wife, Omer lo b'safa rapa ubekoved rosh, you go ahead and you offer him words of eulogy quietly, and ultimately, again, Kovid Rosh with seriousness. So both say, so what do you see from here? You see from here that Halacha L'maisa, the Bryce has said that after Shiva, the Avel could go ahead and inquire about people's welfare and, right, ask and respond without qualification. And you see from this Gemara right now that's not the case. Amar of Idi Bar Avin, Hu shal b'shalom acherim, shacherim shiruim b'shalom. So also the idea is after Shiva, the Avel has the ability to inquire about others' welfare because everyone else is fine. So the Gemara says, shacherim shiruim b'shalom, acherim in shalom b'shlomo. Others should not inquire about his welfare after Shiva until the end of Shloshim. Shehu eino sharoi b'shalom. For he is not in a situation of shalom. So therefore, the way the Gemara is reconciling it is like this: between the third day and the seventh day, between first and third days, so he shouldn't respond. No one should ask him. He shouldn't respond. Or I should say differently: he shouldn't greet, and no one should greet him. Between days 3 and 7, ultimately he could respond to a greeting, but he should not inquire about the welfare of others. And after 7, the Gemara is now suggesting, after 7, he could inquire about the welfare of others, but ultimately still others should not inquire about his welfare. So the Gemara says, but it says he could respond. The fact that he could respond ultimately again indicates thus that people could inquire about his welfare. Delo yadi. No. The case is where they're inquiring about his welfare because they don't know that he's an Avelus. So what the Gemara is saying is, after Shiva, if they inquired about his welfare and they don't know he's an Avelus, ultimately he could respond. The truth is, even between days 3 and 7, he could respond. So the Gemara says, "Ihachi hasam nami." If that's the case, then why not say the same thing by this other case? Rashi says, "Shloshim demukmas le b'shar krovim." Why not go ahead and establish that case? I'm sorry, by Gimel Yamim. Why not go ahead and establish that case by the first 3 days as well? Hasam modalahu. So the Gemara says, "V'lo mahadalu." Both say in days 1 through 3. Interestingly enough, in days 1 through 3, if somebody greets the Avel is obligated to tell them, "I'm sorry, I can't respond to you because I am in the first 3 days of Avelus." That's the obligation that he has. So if somebody extends a greeting to him in days 1, 2, and 3 of Shiva, says, "I'm sorry, I can't respond, I'm currently in Avelus." So the Gemara says, "Hacha lo tzarich la'odeinu." After the first 3 days, although ideally people should not greet the Avel, if they did greet him, he is permitted to go ahead and respond to their greeting. So the Gemara says, "Minhu arei kasha hamotzi es chaveru aval b'sof yud beis chodesh medaber imo tanchumin." If a person finds his friend a novel within the first 12 months after his loss, medaber imo tanchumin, he could say words of consolation, ve'ino shal b'shlomo, but you should not inquire about his welfare, even about say throughout 12 months. In other words, what Chazal are saying is, it's not right to ask an aval how they're doing. All right, I'll say, because think about this in general. When people ask you how you're doing, what do they want to hear? Fine. Very few people actually really want to hear how you're doing, right? And this is an important yesod, because remember, if you become one of those people who actually tells people how you're doing, right? Greg, it's the MS. You're a nice guy. You're a very nice guy, right? It's the MS Lamito. Ask most people, they won't admit to it. But if you become one of those people who actually tells everybody how they're doing, you will find the number of friends and acquaintances decrease dramatically. Because the truth is, most people have their own stuff going on. They're just trying to be nice. They're just trying to give a shalom aleichem. By the way, the obligation is you don't bare your soul to every single person either. When somebody asks you how you're doing, having the kabbalas call adam b'sever panim yafos, fantastic. There are a few people you have in this world who you should bare your soul to. A few people in this world who you can rely on. A few people in this world who you can really tell them what's going on. But in a general sense, how you doing? Great. Have a great day. That's it. Let's move on, people. Right? That's it. So the Gemara says, when you go over to an aval and you say how you're doing, it's not appropriate. How is an aval doing? How is any person who suffered a loss doing? I'm managing. Like there are good days and there are bad days. There are moments when I feel the loss. There are moments when I'm able to compartmentalize it. That's what it is. So the Gemara says as follows. So therefore the Gemara says, here's what's interesting. So therefore, according to this approach, you literally don't ask an aval how he's doing during the 12 months. Now we don't paskin this way. I'll talk to you about the halacha l'mais in just a bit. But the idea is, after 12 months, then you could inquire about his welfare, because then that is a fair question. Because the assumption is, for any point in time after loss, the beginning is difficult. It's not the pshat that it gets easier over time. A person learns how to manage it better over time. When a person first encounters loss is like on the frontal lobe, like it sits on the top of my consciousness, and it's with me all the time. As time goes on, it gets pushed back. It's still there, but Lamais, it doesn't live in my primary consciousness every single moment of every single day. So the Gemara says, listen to this. After Yud Beis Chodesh, v'achar Yud Beis Chodesh, shal b'shlomo, ve'ino medaber imo tanchumin. But say, listen to this. After 12 months, you're not allowed to give a person consolation. Isn't that fascinating? You can't speak words of nechama, of consolation, after 12 months. Aval medaber imo minatzad. you could kind of make a veiled reference to consolation. Rashi says over here, it's almost right across in Rashi, Yedabra imo tanchumim min atzad, la'achar lamid ki hechi da'avela ve'imo, da'ave ve'imo. So minatzad means tinachamenu. Rashi says, for example, you could say to a person, the mourners should be consoled. So you kind of don't speak in a specific way towards him, but you speak in a general sense that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bring the chama to mourners. And Abba said, the Gemara says something so profound. If you find your friend in Avelos after 12 months, and you speak words of consolation, lemahu dome, to what could he be compared to? So listen to how profound this is. La adam shenishbara raglo, listen to this, v'chaisa. This could be compared to the following situation. A person who broke his foot. And Baruch Hashem, it healed. And then what? Umatza rofe. So let's say again, the guy who broke his foot, he has a good friend who's a doctor. And the doctor says, Amrlo kilecha etzli, shani shovra ve'erpa'ana. Do me a favor. I just learned this new technique to heal broken limbs. Let me break your foot again so that I could show you how good I could heal it. I want to show you how good my herbs are, how good my medicinal healing is. So I'll say, isn't this incredibly profound? So when you speak words of consolation to a mourner after 12 months, hopefully by after 12 months, they have it together. They have it together. They have it together, right? I've figured out, not that everything is okay, but I figured out how to get through life and how to move myself forward with this loss. When now someone comes along and starts giving words of consolation, what does that do? What does that do? It opens up the wound again. Right? It tears off this, it must be so difficult for you. It must be so, right? And I will say, by the way, you see this all the time. You see this all the time, that very well-meaning people don't understand that sometimes it's not your job to fix the problem, right? Somebody suffered a loss. The truth is, when it comes to loss, my job is just to be there for, our job is just to be there for people. That's all. Rarely do you have something to say that actually makes a difference for a mourner. Rarely does it happen that someone has some theological gem that's wow, I can't believe it. Now Baruch Hashem, the entire weight of humanity has been lifted off me because, Chaim Yankel walked in and shared this thing that he saw on ish.com or something, whatever, whatever it is. So this is an incredibly important yesod, right? That at the end of the day, the job of a friend, of a community, is just to be there. Because the only thing worse than suffering is suffering alone. Rarely is there something to say. And the Gemara says, especially after the mourner has been through Yud Beis Chodesh, let them heal, and just be there. Just be there with them. Don't offer words of consolation, because perhaps those words of consolation can actually have an adverse effect. We'll say an incredible yesod in general with friendship and what it means to be part of community. It just means to be there for people. You don't always have to know what to say. In fact, rarely do we actually know what to say. But the best thing you could do is just be present. And people when they're suffering, remember those who are present. They don't necessarily remember what anyone says, but they remember when people are present, and that makes all the difference. So the Gemara says, Lo kashya, haba avivimo, haba shakrovim. So Gemara says, not a contradiction. It's talking about two different cases, right? One is talking about avelus for a parent. So avelus for a parent, we've established, lasts for 12 months. So the halacha, therefore, is you don't inquire about the welfare of the avel for an entire 12 months. But for other relatives, where the avelus just lasts, the avelus is for 30 days, the prohibition to inquire about the avel's welfare is for 30 days. But after 30 days, it's totally mutter. I don't say, but even in that case, why not go ahead, right? Even during shloshim for other relatives, why not give them words of consolation kind of in a nuanced fashion? To which the Gemara says, yes, you can. What does it mean when it says you can't talk words of consolation with them? Kidarko, in a normal fashion. But ultimately, again, you can go ahead and offer them words of consolation in a nuanced fashion. So I will say, I just want to point out that all of these cases over here, I mentioned this before, when the Gemara spoke about the idea that one of the things that an avel is not allowed to do is she'ilas shalom. right? Which means that Avel can't greet people. So I will say, so the truth is, the Gemara's form of Shelas Shalom is a Shalom Aleichem, right? Is a greeting with the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So a person, Achmana Litzlan, is in Avelos, they can't go ahead and greet someone with a Shalom Aleichem. Can you say to someone, good morning, good afternoon, I'm so happy you came? We should never be in that situation, but yes, you're allowed to say those things. These greetings also, what the Gemara is trying to sensitize us to, is that you don't launch into a diatribe of consolation when the person is still in their window of mourning. See, part of the beauty of Judaic mourning practices is we allow people to mourn. We allow people to feel pain. We don't go ahead and try to wish it away or talk it away. I will say that's why, again, at our Levias, there's no green right over the mound of dirt. It's just the mound of dirt there. We don't bury in a fancy casket, a pine wood box. We fill in the grave ourselves, right? There's no flowers at the cemetery. All of that is done because all of those things are there to pretty up the dynamic of death. We don't pretty up the dynamic of death. It is what it is. We accept it, we embrace it, because the only way to heal is to embrace the reality of one's circumstances. So that's what Chazal are sensitizing us to as well. A person is going to be in pain. And we have to accept that a person is going to be in pain, and there's nothing you could do to ease it. It's just a progression. It's a journey. So therefore Chazal say, don't offer words of consolation during the window of mourning. You could be there, you could say nuanced things, right? You can make statements of friendship, I'm here for things like that, but words of consolation ring hollow during that window of Avelos. After the window, you could say whatever you want, but during the window, let the person experience their pain and just be present for them as a good friend. The Gemara goes back there. We'll say this is an incredible halacha. So we'll say here we come now to a halacha that discusses the following. Here's the case, and we'll see how this applies contemporarily as well. Avel, we'll say here's the case. We'll call him Yaakov passed away. So Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are sitting Shiva, brothers. Yehuda, who's another brother, is out of town. He comes and he joins the other brothers during Shiva. Whatever it is, he didn't find out at the same time that his brothers did. Let's assume that kind of case. So now Yehuda shows up, and he shows up during Shiva. Rabbi say, what's going to be the shaila? What's the duration of Yehuda's Shiva? Does Yehuda's Shiva begin when he shows up at the Shiva house? Or does Yehuda's Shiva begin when his brothers started sitting Shiva 3 days ago? So the Gemara says, here's the case. So the Gemara says like this. If Yehuda was close by and he arrived within the first 3 days of Avelos, he goes by their clock. Right? So let's say again, the brothers, Yaakov died on Matzei Shabbos, they buried him, the brothers started sitting Shiva on Sunday, right? So Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are sitting Shiva on Sunday. Yehuda shows up on Tuesday, right? Or whatever, call it Tuesday, right? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So he shows up on Tuesday. So the Gemara says 2 qualifications. If he's there within the first 3 days, and he's coming from a nearby place, therefore, halacha lemaisa, he could count the duration of Shiva along with his brothers, and he will get up along with them. Rashi says over here something very interesting. Rashi says, Mona imay ma'avelim sheba osamakom haldu b'makom karov havayachal lava b'tchilas ha'avelos chashvin alei kimo da'asa de'ina mana. We're supposed to do this because he's coming from a close place. Technically speaking, he could have been with them from the beginning. Right? He didn't hear about it till later or some other circumstance, but since he was close by, he could have been with them from the beginning, and therefore, halacha l'maisa, he counts along with them. However, bami makom rachok, but if he was far away, mona liatzmo. There will say if he's far away, even if he comes in the first 3 days, he begins his count of Shiva from the time he arrives in the Shiva house. Mikan ve'ilech, but if he arrives after the first 3 days, afilu ba mimakom karov mona liatzmo. But even if he comes after the first 3 days, even if he came from a close by place, he begins his own count of Shiva. So we'll say a really fascinating halacha. So this is the first opinion. First opinion says, if he shows up in first 3 days, and he's coming from a close by location, a Makom Karov, ultimately, again, he could count along with the brothers, right? However, if he comes either during the first 3 days, but from a faraway place, or after first 3 days, no matter where he's coming from, then Allah L'maisa, he begins his own count of Shiva from the time he arrives. So Rabbi Shimon says no. Afilu ba b'yom hashvi Makom Karov moni ma. Rabbi Shimon says it all has to do with where the brother is coming from. And as long as he was in close proximity to the Shiva home, then even if he shows up on day number 7 of the Shiva, and he sits a little bit with his brothers, it's counted as if he sat Shiva. Amar Mar, Gimel Yomim Harishonim, so both sides Rabbi Shimon. Mar says, the first 3 days, Ba mi makom karov mona imahen, so we'll say now we're quoting the Brisa. Right? So we'll say fundamental machlokes Tanakama Rabbi Shimon. So listen to this. So we said before, if he shows up in the first 3 days, and he comes from a close place, he could count his Shiva together with the brothers who are already sitting. Oh. Both say, so now we come to a different halacha, which is a fascinating halacha, the halacha of Gadol Babayis. Gadol Babayis, and the Gemara says as follows, Rabbi Chibar Abba says in Rabbi Yochanan, when do we say that if one of the brothers shows up over the course of Shiva, right over the course of Shiva, that he could count his Shiva along with the Shiva counting of everybody who was already sitting in the Beis Avon, the house of mourning? That's when the Gadol Babayis, the head of family, was sitting Shiva in the home. See, I both say the assumption that we'll get into in just a moment, but the assumption that halacha makes is that everyone is kind of subservient to the Gadol Babayis, to the head of family. And if the head of family is sitting Shiva in a particular location, then kind of everyone, all the other Avelim, are tethered to him. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Sheish gadol babayis, babayis, sheba umatzo gadol habayis babayis, mona imad im aveli habayis, v'zeh sheba hu atzoyer mimenu. Sheba says, now listen to this case. In this case over the Gemara, so Rabbi Yochanan is suggesting the following. That when do we say, right? So remember, Yaakov passed away. His sons, he has 4 sons, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. Right? So what happens? Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are sitting Shiva for their father. Yehuda found out about it afterwards. Yehuda shows up on Tuesday. Right? 3rd day of the Shiva. So we'll say, so remember, what's the Shaila? So where is Yehuda up to on Shiva? Is Tuesday day 1 for Yehuda? And therefore, again, he's going to go for 7 days from there? Or is Tuesday day 3? So now Rabbi Yochanan is saying it depends. Is the head of household sitting Shiva in the Shiva home? And for example, let's say Reuven, the oldest brother, he's the head of the family. So as long as Reuven, the head of the family, is sitting there observing Shiva, everyone is kind of bottled to him. Everyone is subservient to him, and therefore the clock for Shiva starts for everyone when the Gadol Babayis, the head of the family, begins to sit. Now Rashi points out over here, Avalim Haya Gadol Baderech Uba B'Soch Shloshi Yamim Afilu Mimakom Karov Mona Liatzmo Delo Chashiv Avelis Ditzayer Litztarifi Gadol. So we'll say, however, if let's say Yehuda, right, the brother who shows up on day number 3, if he's the Gadol Babayis, right, if he's the head of household, then this halacha ultimately again would not work, and Yehuda would have to begin his count of Shiva using Tuesday as day number 1. See, we'll say, I'll show you where this halacha comes up. Rachman all of the time. Listen to this. So the Gemara says as follows: Halach Gadol Habayis Labeis Hakvaras Mahu. We'll say, what about the following situation? What happens if halacha lamaisa, the head of household, the Gadol Habayis? Now, I'll just point out how you define Gadol Habayis is an actually interesting machlokes in halacha. So, for example, the Shulchan Aruch codifies this halacha about the Gadol Habayis, and the Gadol Habayis is the head of the family. The head of the family. Right? Now, what does that mean? So there are a couple of ways of defining it. It could be if there's one person who supports everyone, that's one of the Gadol Habayis. Right? Or it could also be the person who, when there are family decisions to be made, no decision is made without this person. right? Or this person has the final say. So it doesn't have to be the oldest member of the family, but it's really the member of the family whose eitzah, whose wisdom and whose opinion matters the most. Okay, so here's the case. Halach gadol habayis lebeis hakvaris. Listen to this case. The gadol habayis went to the cemetery. Rashi says over here, Achar mitasa lekavro v'shaha gimel yamim v'shasham gimel yamim. So mahu. So we'll say in this case over here, the gadol habayis is the one who went to bury the dead, and let's say again he's gone for a couple of days. Mahu. What's the halacha? What's the halacha? And I will say what we're going to see over here is something very interesting. Even if the gadol habayis went to the cemetery, he counts with them. Now, counts with them, what does that mean? Mone imohen, vatanya, mone liatzmo. It says he counts Shiva on his own. So you'll see how this case makes sense in just a moment. Lokashya, hada asa begot lasa, hada lo asa begot lasa. Now, now listen to this. It depends. Is he coming back within 3 days? Not come back within 3 days. Now, the case over here that the Gemara is framing is a very important case in halacha. Yaakov dies. Let's assume Reuven is the gadol habayis. Reuven goes to bury his father. Everyone else stays behind. Now we are going to see an interesting halacha that when you have mourners who are not going to participate in the burial, their shiva begins when? Immediately, before the burial. What's a very unique halacha? Normally the way Avelos works is like this: a person dies, there's aninos, right? Then there's burial. Burial triggers shiva. However, if mourners are not going to the burial, then they begin to sit shiva as soon as they take leave of the mace. So this is maisim b'chol yom in situations where people are buried in Eretz Yisrael, right? Rarely do you have an entire family going to Eretz Yisrael. You'll usually have a member or a few members of the family. Everyone else begins to sit shiva. Literally, right after that, they have a funeral here in America. Everyone begins to sit shiva immediately, and there are relatives who are going with the mace. So the Gemara says, so in this case over here, the gadol habayis is going with the mace. So the Gemara says now, does he go ahead and start his own clock for shiva after the burial, or does he sit with the rest of the family? So the Gemara wants to make a distinction. It depends. If he comes back within the first 3 days of shiva, he could sit with the family. If he does not come back within the first 3 days of Shiva, he sits on his own. We'll see what the halacha is. Kihad Amar Lahu Rav Libnei Hatzalfoni. So Rav said to the people of Hatzalfoni. So what's Hatzalfoni? Rashi says, or Hatzalfoni. Rashi says either it's the name of a place, it's Makom, name of a place. When the person who buried the dead comes back within 3 days, he could count along with you. But if he doesn't come back within 3 days, then Allah Lamaise should count on his own. Amarluhu Rav Labnei Mechuza. Rav said to the people of Mechuza, Asun de lo azlisu basar arsa. Listen to this. Rav said to the people of Mechuza, you who do not follow the casket to burial. So also remember again, in Mechuza, they often used to take their dead to Eretz Yisrael. It was the custom of Mechuza that the mourners would not accompany the dead to burial in Eretz Yisrael. They would go and give it over to the Chevra Kadisha, or someone else would do it. So Rabbah said to the people of Mechuza, Asundalo azlisu basa arsa, you who do not follow the casket to burial. So the Gemara says, Mechi mahadrisu apaychu mibava da'avula aschilu manu. As soon as you go ahead and you turn away from the gate of the city, begin your shiva. So both say the people of Mechuza would not accompany their dead to Eretz Yisrael, and therefore again Rava said to them, as soon as essentially the Levaya is over, as soon as you take your leave of the dead, begin Shiva. So both say a number of very important halachas. So both say I'll just point out, see today it's a little bit more difficult to kind of identify who's the Gadol Babayis, but Abosva, you should know, the halacha is that in general, when someone is taking a deceased relative for burial in Eretz Yisrael, and you have relatives who begin sitting Shiva here, the relative who's taking the dead for burial follows the Shiva schedule of the relatives who are here. So halacha lamaisa, right? He goes, he buries, or she goes, she buries, goes, comes back, they're on the same Shiva timetable as the rest of the mishpacha. Especially if the Gadol Shababayis is sitting Shiva. So for example, let's say again, the father passes away, one of the children takes the father for burial in Eretz Yisrael, the mother and the rest of the siblings are there. Let's assume for a moment that the mother is the Gadol Shababayis. Halacha l'maisa, the Shiva schedule for the family is established by her presence. And therefore again, it could very well be that the son who took his father for burial in Eretz Yisrael is by the time he gets there, gets back, depending on the timing, he comes back, it's the fourth day of Shiva, he observes the rest of the duration of Shiva with his family, and halacha l'maisa gets up with them. A fasting halacha. And I will say, there are more technical cases. There are certain situations where it's a little bit different. Well, let's say again, what happens if the child sits some Shiva in Eretz Yisrael, then comes back, no Gadol Shiva Bayis, duration or delay in burial. So there are kind of wrinkles in this halacha, but not wrinkles in the halacha, there are wrinkles in certain situations. But again, big gadol, kind of in a panoramic view, this is the halacha. Incredible. Rabbi Shimon Omer, afilu babi mashimi makam karov monei man. Now what Rabbi Shimon said in the Brisa before, that halacha l'maisa, even if the aval shows up on the last day of Shiva, but he came from a close by place, he could still count Shiva along with them. Rabbi Shimon holds that if one of the relatives was close by, so because there was proximity, it's as if he was with them the entire time, but he doesn't actually show up until day number 7. As long as he's able to observe a little bit of Shiva with them, it counts as if he sat Shiva. This only works if we'll call him Yehuda, when Yehuda showed up on day number 7, there are still actual consolers there. In other words, that there are people who are being menachim although when he shows up on day number 7. By Ravanan, so Ravanan says, Ninaru la'amod v'lo amdu mau. We'll say, give you a good example of this. Remember again, the way it works by us by Shiva is that Avelim don't observe a full 7th day. Right? Remember again, it's Mixas Yom Kikulo. Part of the day is like the whole. So imagine the following scenario. So Yehuda shows up on day number 7. Now day number 7 usually just lasts for a couple of minutes after Shachris. So again, if he shows up after Shachris and the comforters, right, then Menachamim are still sitting there, good. What happens if by the time Yehuda comes on day number 7, the Menachem are already getting ready to get up? Right? The last group of consolers are getting ready to get up. Does that count as if he has arrived during Shiva? To which the Gemara says, Teku. Okay. Gemiri Chavri Rabbi Abba Bar Abba, Rabbi Abba, Manu Rabbi Zera, Amrei Chavri Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Zera, Manu Rabbi Abba, Berei Rabbi Chia Bar Abba, Am Rabbi Yochanan, Halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel B'Trefus, Halacha Rabbi Shimon be'Aval. We'll say, so again, they said the Halacha follows Rabbi Shimon Gamliel by Trefus, and the Halacha follows Rabbi Shimon by Avelos. So Rabbi Shimon ba'Aval had Amr, so we'll say we just said Rabbi Shimon by Aval. Rabbi Shimon by Aval was that even if Yehuda, the son, shows up on day number 7 of Avelos, but he was close by, and there are still some comforters who are there giving comfort to the mourners, that he could count Shiva along with his family and get up along with them. What does it mean? We'll say first wide line. Rabbi Shimon Trefus. What's the case of Rabbi Shimon that we follow Shimon Gamliel by Trefus? Listen to this. Tisnan b'nei ayam shenik v'velecha sos masan kshera. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. We'll say intestines. So Hilchos Trefus. If you shecht an animal and you open up the animal and you check the intestines and the intestines are punctured, that's a treifa. That is a disqualifying blemish that leads the animal to be rendered non-kosher. So I'll say, but what happens if the intestines were punctured, but some of the intestinal mucus plugs up the hole? Plugs up the hole, right? Good. This is good, right? Plugs up the hole. So I will say, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, good, animal is kosher. Animal is kosher, right? Intestinal mucus always saves the day. So the Gemara says, my lecha, what's lecha? Amrav Kahana, shirka or sirka demaya dinafek agav duchka. It's the mucus that comes out when you go ahead and you press the intestines. Okay? So Amar manduhu iski va'asik va'agmara l'shmaita mipumei dimarei. Shabbos says, there was a guy, unnamed guy, who overheard this discussion, and he said, if only I could go to Eretz Yisrael and hear this from Shimon Gamliel himself. So the Gemara says, Kisalik, so this guy made it to Eretz Yisrael, Ashkechei, Rabbi Abba, Breid, Rabbi Chia Bar Abba, Amar Mar Halach, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel B'Trefus. So he found Rabbi Abba, and he's Rabbi Abba, did you really say that the halacha follows Rabbi Shimon Gamliel B'Trefus? That if the intestines are punctured and some intestinal mucus plugs up the hole, that you're good to go? Amar Le, Ana, Ein Halacha Amri Rabbi Shimon. Amar, Ein Halacha Amri. So the Gemara said, no, I said, the halacha doesn't follow Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. All right, a little bit of a miscommunication here, right? I didn't say the halacha follows Reb Shimon ben Gamliel by Trefus. I said the halacha doesn't follow him. Okay, Reb Shimon. So now we've established the halacha does not follow Reb Shimon ben Gamliel by Trefus. Fine. So what about Amri Kisud Gemara Reb Shimon be'eva mai? What about Reb Shimon by Avelos? I was well said that we accept the position of Rabbi Shimon by Avelos, namely that halacha l'maisa, if you show up on day number 7, right, from a makam kara, from a close by place, that you could still be considered to be observing Shiva with the Avelim. Amar li plugteninu. This is a machlokes. De'itmar Rav Chisda Amar halacha. V'china Amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha. Rav Nachman Amar ein halacha. So we'll say it's a machlokes. It's a machlokes. We pass like Rabbi Shimon. Ve'ein halacha Rabbi Shimon Gamliel b'Trefus. V'halacha Rabbi Shimon ba'Avel. So I'll say the Gemara ends off by saying the halacha does not follow Rabbi Shimon Gamliel by Trefus, but it does follow Rabbi Shimon by Avelos. Why? The Amar Shmuel halacha k'divrei hamekel be'evel. Because ultimately, again, Shmuel said the halacha follows by the halacha always follows the lenient opinion by Avelos. And I will say, therefore, we do have a situation like we do pass in that way, that if because of some circumstance, right, Yehuda, the brother, doesn't show up until day number 7, that ultimately, again, he could be included in the Shiva of the family and get up with the family. Again, the circumstances are often a bit more complicated than the way the Gemara is laying it out, but technically speaking, that possibility does exist. That you show up, a family member shows up at the end of Shiva, and yet is still considered to have been observing Shiva with the same duration, the same clock as the family. Good. But say the Gemara goes weiter. This is a fascinating halacha. By all other relatives, if you bury them quickly, Rashi says, you take the mace, you take the corpse out quickly to bury them, it's meshubach, it's considered to be good. For one's parents, if you rush the funeral, it's not good. Now, what does this mean? What this means is as follows. The Gemara is saying, if you go ahead and you bury a relative quickly, and pretty much with minimal eulogies, right, that's good. By parents, burying them so quickly that you don't have time for eulogies, that is considered to be a slight to the parents. They're both saying that to be clear. The Gemara is not saying, therefore, you delay. Remember, in halacha, we have a concept of burying as quickly as possible. That is considered to be kavod hameis, right? You know, in Eretz Yisrael, they even do levayas at night. Here, outside, in the Hasidic communities, they also do levayas at night. But outside of that, we don't really do it. But again, but lamaisa, as quickly as possible. The Gemara is talking about over here that when burying a parent, you have to leave time for eulogies. You have to properly be malava the parent. So the Gemara says, however, Haya Erev Shabbos Erev Yamtiv, Harezem Meshubach. But we'll say if the parent passed away on Erev Shabbos or Erev Yamtiv, then you bury quickly, even if it means what? Lack of eulogies. And we'll say, because we'd rather go ahead and bury quickly before Shabbos, before Yamtiv, rather than what? Then delay the funeral until after Shabbos. After the this is incredibly important. This comes up so often, especially when you have out-of-town family, right? And sometimes well-meaning people, want to wait for out-of-town family to come in for the levaya, for this. And I will say, the most important thing that one could do for their loved ones in the Shema is you bury a body as quickly as possible. That is for the benefit of the neshama. And there's more kavod hameis in an expeditious burial than there is in waiting for family to come in. It's the nature. Not everybody could be there for every single thing. Because also think about this. Going ahead and waiting for a family member I'm not talking about children. I'm talking about children. Children are a different discussion. But waiting for a family member is putting the needs of extended family over the needs of the mace. So it's incredibly important. What the mace needs more than anything is to be buried. That's what the mace needs. That's what the neshama needs, is to be buried. It's painful for the neshama to remain in an unburied state. It tethers the neshama to the body, as opposed to allowing the neshama to begin its ascent mala. So that's why we bury as quickly as we can. So the Gemara therefore says, if it's a choice between a nice levaya with hespedim on Sunday and leaving the parent unburied over the weekend versus a hastier burial on Erev Shabbos, we bury Erev Shabbos. Let the parents neshama go into Shabbos Kodesh untethered and free and able to make its ascent. So the Gemara says, Akula Mesim Kulon, Rotzim Amai Pa'askar, Another interesting halacha. Another interesting halacha for all other mesim, if a person wants to minimize his business dealings, he could do so. Amud Beis. But for his parents, he has to go ahead and be memait. He has to diminish. Now, this is a little bit of a strange Gemara because we already established that what? That halacha l'maisa Abel's not allowed to do malacha. So there's a whole discussion about this Gemara. What exactly does it mean? Maybe what the Abel's not allowed to do is physical labor. Maybe that's what the Abel's not allowed to do. Asik over here, what are they talking about? Business. I gotta answer some emails. I gotta do a whole bunch of things. So maybe what the Gemara is saying is like this. By other relatives, if you need to conduct some business, you could do so. By parents, you really can't do it. Now, we'll say now the halacha is we try to go ahead and avoid all types of malacha, both manual labor as well as active business dealings. Sometimes it happens over the course of Shiva that a person has things for work that they must do. And if a person doesn't do them, it represents a davar ha'avud, a significant loss. So in those situations, we tell the abba that they can do it, but we urge them to do it bitsina, privately. So whether that means at night after everyone leaves, or whether it means again a person excuses themselves into a different room. But one thing is coming: the Aval certainly should not be on his email, right? Going ahead and sitting there in front of the Menachamim. That's for sure. So the Gemara goes right to Akol Mason Kulon Ratza Choletz Ratza Eno Choletz. It's a very interesting halacha. They used to have a practice of what we call chalitza. They would bare their shoulder. Now what they would really do is as follows: they would tear kriya. They would put their arm through the tear in the cloak, thereby baring their shoulder. So baring your shoulder was a display of mourning. So for all other relatives, if you want to bare your shoulder, you can. You don't want to, you don't have to. Ultimately, again, for your parents, you bare your shoulder. So let's listen to this story. So there was once a story with the Gadol Hadar who lost his father, and therefore he wanted to bare his shoulder. And there was another Gadol Hadar who was with the first Gadol Hadar. So we'll say, Gadol Hadar A lost his father, and he wanted to bare his shoulder. Gadol Hadar B is there with his friend. Gadol Hadar, they hang out with each other, right? So Gadol Hadar B, right, was with his friend Gadol Hadar A, and he wanted to also bare his shoulder in respect, out of deference, to his friend Gadol Hadar A, who was the Avel. V'nimna v'lo chalatz. And I will say, as a result, Gadol Hadar A didn't bare his shoulder, because he felt that if Gadol Hadar B was going to mimic him, that would be a slight to the honor of Gadol Hadar B. So therefore, Gadol Hadar A abstained from baring his shoulder in order not to impugn the dignity of Gadol Hadar B. I would say, by the way, what a profound Gemara. That sometimes you have to give up doing certain things that you may be entitled to do because they could have a potential adverse effect on someone else. Just because I have a right to do it doesn't mean that I should do it, especially if what I'm going to do is going to have a negative effect on someone else. Such an incredible yisod. Amar Abaye. So Abaye said, who are the people over here? So Gadol Hadar, Rebbe. So it must be that the Gadol Hadar who was in Avelos, it was Rebbe. Gadol Hadar She'imo, his friend, was Rav Yaakov Bar Acha. The Kedamri, an alternate version of this, Gadol Hadar Rav Yaakov Bar Acha. No, the Gadol Hadar Rav Yaakov Bar Acha. Gadol Hadar She'imo Rebbe. His friend, the non-mourner friend, was Rebbe. To which the Gemara says, Bishlam the Mandar Gadol Hadar She'imo Rebbe. So we'll say, makes more sense to say that the Gadol Hadar was Rav Yaakov Bar Acha, and the friend was Rebbe. Hainu dinimna v'lo chalatz. Therefore, Rav Yaakov Bar Acha did not bare his shoulder because he realized that if he would, Rebbe would end up doing it as well. El man d'amar Rav Yaakov Bar Acha. But I will say, if you say that the friend was Rav Yaakov Bar Acha, which means that the mourner was who? The mourner was Rebbe. I will say, Rebbe was whose son? Reb Shimon Gamliel. Reb Shimon Gamliel was the Nasi. If it was indeed Reb Shimon Gamliel that passed away, Amai nimna v'lo chalatz. Reb Shimon Gamliel Nasi hava the kuli alma mechayvi l'michlatz. We're going to see when the Nasi, who is the head of the Jewish people, passes away, everyone is obligated to mourn, and everyone is obligated to do kriya and to bare their shoulder. So it must be that the story went like this. Rav Yaakov Bar Acha, who was one of the Gedolei Hadar, lost his father, and he was ready to bare his shoulder. His friend Rebbe was with him, and Rebbe was going to bare his shoulder as well out of deference to his friend who was mourning. And therefore Rav Yaakov Bar Acha decides, no, I'm not going to do it because I can't have a situation where Rebbe is going to bear his shoulder, and therefore he didn't do so. But we'll say that has to be the version, because if it's the other version, if it's Rebbe who's the mourner, then the truth is everybody would have been obligated to bear their shoulder anyway, out of deference or out of mourning for the death of the Nasi. Incredible. I'll call Hamesim Kulam Mistar Liachar. We'll say very interesting halacha. In general, the prohibition or the restriction on haircutting and shaving extends for shloshim, right? So for all other relatives means any other laws other than a mother and father, you cannot shave, take a haircut for 30 days. The Gemara says, what says interesting. When a person loses one of his parents, the restriction on shaving or haircutting extends past shloshim. When does it go until? Until your friends tell you look terrible, right? Until your friends tell you really need a haircut, you really should shave, right? Only once my friends go ahead and tell me this, does halacha l'maisa, do I have a license to go ahead? Now, by the way, your friends could tell you this right when shloshim finishes. In other words, my friends have a license. In other words, I can't do anything before shloshim. After shloshim, I have to wait until my friends tell me. People say this is part of kibbud avayim. The idea being that when that part of my kibbud avayim is I'm not going to shave, I'm not going to take a haircut out of mourning for my parents. But once someone tells me that I really need to do this, then the halacha allows me to do it. We'll discuss that more in just a bit. So the Gemara says, what's another interesting halacha? For all other losses other than parents, so remember, Avelos ends after Shloshim, after 30 days. And therefore one could attend Simchas, right? One could attend happy celebrations. But for parents, one has to wait to attend the celebration until after 12 months. Amar Rab Bar Chana says, Simchas Mereus. Rab Bar Chana says that what? That halacha l'maisa, for a Simchas Mereus, ultimately again, the Avel could even go into after Shloshim. Now what's a Simchas Mereus? Look at Rashi. Simchas Mereus, this is very interesting. He says, Su'uda sha'osim reim ba'ahuvim zeh im zeh, v'lo havi simcha kol kach. I will say, so listen to this, actually a beautiful idea. You have a group of friends, and what do the group of friends do? They have meals together, right? So it's a chevra of friends, right? Five friends, and they rotate having each other over for meals. It's called Simchas Mereus, right? Reus means from friendship. So therefore Rashi says over here, Lo havi simcha kol kach. That's not called such a big simcha. So therefore the Gemara says, after shloshim, the Avel is permitted to participate in a simchas mereus. So the Gemara says, really? Neisvei, or the simcha or the mereus la midyom. It says for simcha and for mereus, Avel could only participate after 30 days. So it sounds like mereus is a real simcha as well. Kasha, that's a question. So Meimar Masni Haki, Meimar had a different version. Rabbi Bechana l'simchas mereus, mutli kanis the altar. Rabbi Bechana said about listen to this, that for a simchas mereus, this friend group Su'uda, you can go ahead and participate immediately. But it says mereus, you have to still wait until after shloshim lo kashya, ha ba'arisusa, ha b'poranusa. The boss said this is very interesting. When do you have to wait? You have to wait, ultimately again, you have to wait before you go ahead and, I will say, let's say this group just formed, and now someone's going to offer the first invitation. The Avel can't offer the first invitation during his shloshim. But if, let's say, the group already existed, and now we're up to reciprocal invitations, the Avel could accept a reciprocal invitation to his friend group even during shloshim. Now, I will say, the truth is we don't really pass in this way. We treat social gatherings kind of as one grouping. Now, whether again it's a group of friends or whether it's an actual simcha, anything that has socializing and food, that's the ikar. If it has a social component and food, we tell the avel to avoid. Now, how long to avoid? Who has to avoid? What to avoid? Again, those are all the shaylas that come up in the duration of Hilchos Avelos. But during Shloshim, we would tell, not for mother and father, we would tell a person, don't attend something that has strong socialization and food. Right? For parents, during Yud Beis Chodesh, 12 months, don't attend something that has socialization and food. And that covers a lot of things. That could be a Shabbos meal with a bunch of families. That could be a chasana. So again, these are where all of the shaylas in Hilchos Avelos really come up in terms of what could an Avel attend, what can't an Avel attend. And again, it depends who you're in Avelos for. and what stage of the Avelus Yonah. So we have to stop over here. We are going to start tomorrow morning. As much as I wanted to get started with Tzaddik, we're going to get started tomorrow morning in Be'ez Hashem at 5:45. Get caught up a little bit. We'll say incredible sugyas. Shkoyach.